John Huddy, thank you. All right, let's welcome in now former senior CIA field officer Raymond White. Alongside him is U.S. Air Force Combat C-17 commander for the U.S. Air Force, U.S. military representative to NATO, and Newsmax contributor Blaine Holt. Welcome, gentlemen. Before we dive into the latest with Iran, I'd like to get your reaction to John Huddy's report. Raymond, I'll start with you. What do you think?
This was the one on Cuba?
Sorry. The reaction to Cuba, whether there's going to be any type of action in Cuba.
Great. Yeah, so Christina, thanks for having me back. Cuba is essentially a completely different animal than Iran. Iran's the size of Alaska. Cuba, clearly not the size of Alaska. Cuba is also, surrounded by water. The issue with the drones is that these drones, the Shahed 136 in particular, has anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 mile radius it can travel. So obviously that's a concern. It can hit New England, it can hit Washington, D.C., and of course Florida, which would be high on the Cubans' list. But what we have essentially is a situation where they're surrounded. They're surrounded by water, and also the United States has the ability to blockade the country, and they're clearly going through some tough times right now economically in terms of power, in terms of food shortages, and also oil. So I suspect what we're seeing here on their part, on the Cuban part, is essentially just a show of force, essentially, to let the United States know, hey, you know what, we still have benefactors with Russia and China and Iran, and if need be, we have these weapons, so don't think twice about invading us. Not that that necessarily would be the administration's strategy.
Right. Well, Bladen, CENTCOM posting on X this morning, forces began launching a wave of strikes against Iran. The strikes are designed to further degrade military capabilities Iranian forces have used to attack commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. It comes after dozens of overnight strikes. President Trump now says bridges and power plants could be next. If that still doesn't force Iran's leadership to negotiate, what other options are available?
Oh, there's just infinite options. They're not all just military either. What we're going to do now is the primary objective is to blow the straits open, degrade the IRGC down to a status where guerrilla groups, indigenous forces, and a burgeoning revolution can handle that as they take comfort that there's American air power overhead. And so what I guess I'm saying is we're going to take this thing to an unconditional surrender and victory. It's not about getting somebody back to a table so they can lie to us again. And we see elements of the Kurds working together with groups inside country. We can certainly resupply the Iranians wherever they need it. But world economy, number one. Number two, regime is largely going to be done here, and that's where the curtain call is going to end up coming. And then we'll take on Lloyd's of London at the exact same time, because they've been very much an impediment to this entire process, and President Trump has called them out many times.
Yep, I love to hear you say that. Well, Raymond, as Trump orders renewed Iranian blockade, Iran is threatening to block more vital seaways. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has threatened to close all export corridors that benefit the U.S. and its allies. In a statement, the IRGC said regional energy exports are either shared by all or denied to all. Should this threat be taken seriously? What do you think?
So that's a good question. Obviously, the Strait of Hormuz has been on everyone's minds, particularly the EU. They're losing, I think it's $50 million a day every day it's closed. And also China, that gets 20% of its Brent crude oil imports from Iran. Iran ships 90% of its oil to China. So there's other players here who have a vested interest in seeing the Strait of Hormuz stay open. What I would say is this, Iran shares the Strait of Hormuz with Oman. Yes, they both have their territorial waters that reach out across the strait. However, there are UN treaties and other international treaties in place that protect the safe transport of vessels and oil and cargo throughout the Strait of Hormuz. I think what we're seeing now, and just to allude back to my colleague's point here, is that, the idea of using a Western negotiating style with Iran has yielded no results. So what I mean there is particularly rewarding good behavior with incentives, with economic incentives, and with other incentives. I think what we really need to do is actually use the psychology of the Iranians, which in fact is use negative reinforcement. So continue the negative reinforcement against Iran to the point where they say, no mas, no more. And then they decide to change their ways.
I think that's a really good point. It seems like President Trump has tried a number of different tactics, as you've mentioned, and he seems to be going the same direction as your train of thought. So, Raymond, General Holt, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Christine.
Thanks, Christine.